My name is Colette Brennan. I'm 34 years old. And 6 months ago, my mother-in-law dragged my suitcase onto the porch of a beach house at 11:47 at night, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "This is my house. You were never welcome here." She said it in front of my husband, who stood in the living room with his hands in his pockets like a man watching rain through a window. She said it in front of her sister Maureen, who was standing in the hallway holding a glass of Chardonnay she poured herself from a bottle I had bought. She said it in front of her 71-year-old neighbor, Doris Kendall, who had come outside in a terry cloth bathrobe because she heard the porch light click on and voices carrying across the yard. I stood on that porch in bare feet, wearing a cotton nightgown I'd bought at Target for $12.99, holding my phone in one hand and my car keys in the other. That was it. No shoes, no wallet, no purse, no dignity. The ocean was about 200 yards behind me, doing what it always does, rolling in and pulling back, completely indifferent to the fact that my life was splitting open on a wooden porch in Sunset Beach, North Carolina. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the door or throw her Chardonnay into the hydrangeas. I just looked at the woman who had spent 9 years trying to erase me from her son's life, and I thought one very calm, very clear thought. She has no idea whose name is on this deed. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, not Maureen, not Doris, not even my husband Derek, who was standing 6 feet behind that screen door, doing absolutely nothing, was that 3 weeks later, a sheriff's deputy named Hank Roberson would walk up that same porch, knock on that same front door, and hand Judith Ashworth a formal eviction notice with my signature at the bottom. This is that story. To understand what happened on that porch, you need to understand the Ashworth family of Wilmington, North Carolina. Specifically, you need to understand Judith Elaine Ashworth, born Judith Elaine Farrow in Fayetteville in 1960, was 63 years old, 5'4", 122 pounds of pressed linen and controlled fury. She had worked as a real estate office manager at Cape Fear Realty for 28 years before retiring in 2019 with a small pension and a gold-plated desk clock that she kept on her living room mantel like a war trophy. She had organized open houses, managed listings, coordinated agents, and by her own account, she had single-handedly held that brokerage together for 3 decades. Whether that was true didn't matter. What mattered was that Judith believed it, and Judith's beliefs had a way of becoming the family's reality. Her husband, Gerald Ashworth, had been a regional sales director for a medical supply company called Oak Bridge Medical. Quiet man. Liked golf. Liked his workshop. Didn't talk much at dinner. He died of a massive heart attack in March of 2017 while mowing the lawn on a Saturday afternoon. He was 61 years old. Judith found him face down near the azalea bushes at 4:20 in the afternoon. She called 911, and then, before the paramedics had even arrived, she called Graham, her eldest son. She did not call Derek until after the hospital had pronounced Gerald dead at 5:08 in the evening. Derek found out his father had died from a text message, not a phone call. A text message that read, "Dad passed. Call Graham for details." 7 words. No softening. No, I'm sorry. Not even his name. Just an instruction to call his brother, because even in death Gerald's relevance was routed through Graham first. Gerald left Judith a paid-off 4-bedroom colonial in the Landfall neighborhood, a 2014 Cadillac SRX with 38,000 miles, a life insurance policy worth $340,000, and a brokerage account with $87,000 in index funds. By Wilmington standards, she was more than comfortable. By her own accounting, she was practically destitute, a narrative she maintained with the dedication of a woman who had turned widowhood into a full-time performance. Every dinner, every holiday, every phone call included at least one reference to her finances. "You know I'm on a fixed income. Gerald didn't leave me as much as people think. I have to be careful." She managed that money the way she managed everything else. With an iron grip. a detailed spreadsheet she printed monthly, and a running commentary on everyone else's spending habits. She had 2 sons. My husband Derek Ashworth was the younger one, 36 years old, civil engineer at a firm called Branton & Associates, where he designed stormwater management systems for new residential and commercial developments. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man who mowed the lawn every Saturday at 8 in the morning without being asked, and never raised his voice, not at me, not at strangers, and certainly not at his mother. His older brother Graham was 39, pharmaceutical sales rep for Meriden Health, covering the greater Charlotte metro region. He drove a leased BMW 3 Series, wore Vineyard Vines polos to Sunday brunch, and had perfected the art of performing success without actually achieving it. His wife Renee was 37, a dental hygienist at a practice in South Charlotte. They had 2 children, Mason, 8, and Eloise, 5, and a 4-bedroom house in the Ballantine neighborhood that they had refinanced twice in 4 years. Graham was Judith's golden child. That was not a metaphor. It was a structural fact of the family. She kept his kindergarten artwork framed in her hallway. She kept a leather-bound scrapbook of his Little League seasons, organized by year, with handwritten commentary in the margins describing each game, each hit, each moment when her eldest son had proven himself exceptional. She called him every single morning at 7:15 to ask what he'd had for breakfast, what his day looked like, whether Mason had done well on his spelling test. Derek got a call on Sundays. Sometimes, if she remembered. If Graham hadn't already filled her quota of maternal attention for the week. I met Derek in the spring of 2015 at a farmer's market in downtown Wilmington. I was 25 years old. I had been running a small bookkeeping firm called Brennan Financial Services out of a rented office above a florist shop on Market Street for about 2 years. I had 3 employees, a part-time administrative assistant named Kelsey Prooks, and 42 clients, mostly small businesses, independent contractors, a couple of dental practices, and a landscaping company that did work for the new subdivisions going up along the river. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't impress people at dinner parties. When someone asked what I did and I said bookkeeping, their eyes glazed over before the word was fully out of my mouth. But it was mine. I had built it from nothing after leaving a dead-end accounts receivable job at a Chevrolet dealership in Leland, with $11,000 in savings and a business plan I'd written on a legal pad. During my lunch breaks, I processed my first payroll for a client on my kitchen table at 9:30 at night. I filed my first corporate tax return at 2 in the morning while eating cold spaghetti out of a pot. Every client I signed was a quiet victory. Every quarter I kept the doors open was proof that the girl who graduated from UNC Wilmington with a 3.2 GPA and no connections could build something real. Derek bought a jar of local honey from the vendor next to mine at the market. We talked for 40 minutes, standing between a table of artisanal soap and a woman selling homemade dog treats. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. He called that same evening, which I later learned was unusual for him. He was not the kind of man who called the same day. We went to dinner 3 days later at a seafood place on the waterfront. He ordered the grouper. I ordered the shrimp and grits. He didn't talk about himself much. He asked questions. He listened to the answers. 6 months after that first dinner, I met Judith. The first evening at her house in Landfall told me everything I needed to know about the next 9 years. She opened the front door, looked me up and down, from my ballet flats to my earrings, spending an extra half-second evaluating my handbag, which was a Coach crossbody I'd bought on sale for $65, and said, "Oh, you're shorter than I expected. Not hello, not nice to meet you, not come in, I've heard so much about you." An assessment, a measurement, a verdict delivered before I'd crossed the threshold. Over pot roast and steamed green beans, served on china she told me Gerald's mother had given them as a wedding gift, she asked me what I did for a living. I told her. She set her fork down slowly, the way someone does when they want you to know the pause is deliberate. "Bookkeeping," she said, stirring her green beans with a precision that suggested the beans were somehow at fault. So you're good with other people's money. Not your own, I assume. She laughed. A single controlled laugh, the kind that's designed to invite others to join in while giving her deniability if anyone objects. No one else at the table laughed. Derek squeezed my hand under the tablecloth so hard his knuckles turned white. That's just how she is, he said on the 40-minute drive home. She warms up. She didn't warm up. Not in 6 months. Not in 9 years. What Judith did was establish a pattern, one that repeated at every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering, every casual Sunday dinner. With the precision of a woman who had turned cruelty into a discipline, she never raised her voice. She never insulted me in a way that was obvious enough to confront. She operated in the margins, in the pauses between sentences, in the carefully placed observations that landed like paper cuts, individually minor, collectively devastating. Let me give you 3 specific examples. Christmas 2017, 8 months after Gerald died. Judith hosted dinner at her house, 14 people around her mahogany dining table, including Graham, Renee, the kids, Judith's sister Maureen and her husband Bill, 2 couples from her neighborhood, and a woman from her church named Dolores, who brought a sweet potato casserole that nobody touched. Judith spent the first 30 minutes of the evening telling everyone how Graham had paid for her new roof after the hurricane damage. $12,000. She said the number 4 times. She gestured toward the ceiling each time as if Graham had personally climbed up there and shingled it himself. Then she turned to me, her wine glass balanced perfectly in her right hand, and said, "Colette offered to help too, but honestly, what could she contribute?" 14 people heard that. I had mailed her a check for $2,000 that month. She cashed it on December 19th. I know the exact date because I saw it clear in my business account. She never mentioned it. Not to me, not to Derek, not to anyone at that table. Thanksgiving 2019. Judith announced that Graham and Renee would be taking her to Italy the following spring. Amalfi Coast, a mother-son trip, she called it, even though Renee was explicitly going. She said it would cost around $8,000 for the 3 of them. She turned to Derek and said, "I didn't bother asking you too. I know your budget is tight." She said it with a sympathetic tilt of her head, the kind of head tilt that communicates pity while pretending to communicate understanding. Our budget was not tight. By 2019, Brennan Financial Services had grown to 19 full-time employees, over 200 active clients, and annual revenue of $1.4 million. I had opened a second office in Hampstead. I had hired a full-time operations manager named Sandra Reeves, who had 20 years of experience and who I was paying $85,000 a year. But Judith didn't know any of this because Judith had never once, in 9 years, asked me a single question about my work. Not how is business, not how many people work for you, not what exactly do you do all day. To her, I was the bookkeeper. That was my permanent identity. That was the box she had sealed me into, and she never once opened it to check whether I'd outgrown it. Derek's 34th birthday party, June 2021. 22 guests. Catered appetizers from a local restaurant. A sheet cake from Publix with Derek's name misspelled as Derek, which Judith blamed on the bakery employee without correcting it. She made a toast. She talked about Derek's engineering degree from NC State, his promotion to senior project manager, his work ethic, his father's legacy in him. Then she paused. And in that pause, I felt the room tilt the way it always did, right before she slid the knife in. "And of course," she said, "behind every good man is a woman who knows how to stay out of the way." She looked directly at me when she said it, held my gaze for 3 full seconds, long enough for every person in that room to follow her eyes to me. Renee laughed from across the room. Graham shook his head slightly but said nothing. Derek's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. He always stayed quiet. That was the arrangement with Derek. He loved me genuinely, and I never doubted that, but he had been trained since childhood to absorb his mother's behavior like weather. You don't argue with a hurricane. You wait for it to pass. I used to accept that. I used to tell myself that his silence was protection, that not reacting kept the peace for both of us. But peace that requires your wife's humiliation as a price of admission isn't peace. It's compliance. And compliance has an expiration date. Now, the beach house. This is where every thread of this story converges into a single knot. In February of 2020, my grandmother, Loretta Mae Brennan, passed away at the age of 87. Pneumonia. She went in her sleep at New Hanover Regional Medical Center on February 14th, Valentine's Day, which she would have found poetic and slightly ridiculous. She had lived in a cottage on Sunset Beach, North Carolina, for 31 years. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a screened-in porch with 4 rocking chairs that faced the Atlantic Ocean. The floors were original heart pine that creaked in the hallway near the bathroom. The kitchen still smelled like her cinnamon rolls no matter how many times you scrubbed the counters. The guest bedroom had the quilt she'd hand-sewn for my 10th birthday, a blue and white patchwork with my initials embroidered in the corner. My grandmother bought that house in 1989 for $62,000. By 2020, it was appraised at $780,000. She left it to me. Not to my parents, not to my brother Marcus, not to any of the 6 cousins who showed up at her funeral with flowers and regrets. To me, specifically, exclusively, and irrevocably, in a will drafted by her attorney, Howard Calloway of Calloway and Price in Wilmington, with language so precise it could not be contested, challenged, or reinterpreted by anyone. The house, the land, the furniture, and a maintenance fund of $45,000 held in a dedicated trust. All of it, mine. I didn't tell Judith. I didn't tell Graham or Renee. I didn't tell Maureen. I didn't even tell Derek at first. Not because I was hiding it, but because my grandmother had just died and the house felt sacred, like a room you don't open the curtains in yet, because the light would change everything. I wasn't ready to share it with a family that would reduce it to square footage, resale value, and vacation logistics. When I told Derek 3 months after the funeral, he understood immediately. He agreed we would keep it between us until I was ready. And for 2 years, we did. We'd drive down on Saturday mornings, arriving by 10, and sit on the porch with coffee. We'd grill shrimp for dinner and watch the sun drop into the ocean until the sky turned the color of a bruise. We'd sleep in the master bedroom with the windows cracked open and the sound of the waves coming in like breathing. It was ours. It was quiet. It was the one corner of our life completely untouched by Judith Ashworth. Then, in 2022, Derek let it slip. I don't blame him entirely. Judith had a surgical ability to extract information through persistent, seemingly innocent questions. She called one Tuesday evening and asked where we'd been the previous weekend. She'd driven past our house in Wilmington and noticed the car was gone. Derek, caught off guard, said we'd been at the beach. Sunset Beach. We have a place there. The silence on the other end of that phone lasted 11 seconds. I know, because I was sitting next to him on the couch and I counted. A place, she said. What kind of place? Derek told her. And from that moment, the house stopped being mine. Within 2 weeks, Judith had invited herself down for a weekend. She brought Graham, Renee, Mason, and Eloise. She walked through every room like a county inspector evaluating code compliance. She opened every closet, tested every faucet, ran her finger along every windowsill checking for dust. She stood on the screened porch, hands on her hips, surveying the ocean like she was deciding whether to purchase it. This could be a wonderful family retreat, she said. We should come here every holiday. Not a question. Not a suggestion. A declaration. I said nothing. I stood in my grandmother's kitchen, watching this woman colonize my inheritance with a smile. And I said nothing. Over the following 18 months, Judith commandeered the beach house completely. She had a copy of the key made without asking me. She started referring to the property as the Ashworth Beach House on her Facebook page. She posted photos of the porch, the ocean view, the kitchen, with captions like, "Our family's happy place," and "Blessed to have this retreat." She rearranged my grandmother's furniture, moving the reading chair from the living room window to a corner where it caught no light. She replaced the curtains my grandmother had chosen, pale blue sheers that let the morning sun in like fog, with heavy cream drapes she ordered from Pottery Barn for $180 that she charged to a credit card she told Graham I should reimburse her for. And she threw away my grandmother's recipe box, a wooden box, handmade, with index cards inside written in Loretta's careful slanted script. Pumpkin pie with extra nutmeg for Thanksgiving, Christmas pudding, the one Colette likes, Sunday pancakes, triple the blueberries, she always wants more. 30 years of a woman's kitchen wisdom. 30 years of her handwriting. Gone. In a dumpster at the Sunset Beach transfer station, mixed in with takeout containers and beach trash. When I called Judith about it, her voice was bright and unbothered. "Oh, that old thing," she said. "It was falling apart, Colette. Half the cards were stained. I tossed it during the last visit. You should thank me, honestly. I'm decluttering for you." I held the phone against my ear for 8 seconds after she hung up. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for 11 minutes, staring at the tile, thinking about my grandmother's hands. The way they looked kneading dough on a Saturday morning, the way they felt when she held mine on the porch at sunset and said, "This house will always be yours, Colette." I made sure of it. That was the moment I stopped being Judith's patient daughter-in-law and started becoming someone she had never accounted for. But the actual breaking point, the moment that tips the scale from endurance to action, came on August 9th, 2023. Judith had organized what she called the annual Ashworth Beach Week, a phrase she had invented that year as if this tradition had existed for decades. She sent me an email, not a phone call, not a text, an email with the subject line, "Beach Week Schedule," that included a detailed daily itinerary, a meal assignment chart, a list of groceries I was expected to purchase, and a note at the bottom that read, "Colette, you're on breakfast duty. Monday through Thursday. Derek can handle the grill on Saturday. Please have the guest rooms ready by Thursday afternoon." She had assigned me chores. In my own home, in the house I owned outright, she had invited 12 people without asking me and then emailed me a to-do list. I drove down with Derek on Friday afternoon. The house was already full when we arrived. Judith had come 2 days early with Maureen. Graham and Renee arrived Thursday with the kids. Judith's 3 friends from her women's Bible study group, Pamela, Shirley, and a woman named Barb, who spoke mostly in scripture, arrived Friday morning. When I walked into the master bedroom to put down my bag, the room was already occupied. Judith's clothes were in the closet. Her toiletries were on the bathroom counter. Her reading glasses and devotional were on the nightstand. She had moved our belongings, mine and Derek's, into the smallest guest room at the back of the house. Twin bed. No ocean view. A window that faced the neighbor's fence. When I opened the door and saw my suitcase sitting on that thin mattress, I turned to Derek. He looked at the floor. "She said she needed the bigger room because of her back," he muttered. "She asked me last week." I stared at him. "You didn't think to tell me?" He had no answer. I unpacked in silence. For 3 days, I followed the schedule. I cooked breakfast each morning: eggs, bacon, fruit, pancakes, coffee for 12. I scrubbed the kitchen after every meal. I swept sand from the hallway. I made grocery runs to the Harris Teeter in Charlotte, 22 minutes each way. I washed towels, 14 of them on Monday alone. I emptied the dishwasher. I wiped counters. I refilled the soap dispensers. Judith sat on the porch each afternoon with Pamela, Shirley, and Barb, drinking iced tea sweetened with honey from a jar I had bought, and talking about the blessings of family. On Sunday evening, Maureen offered to help me with the dishes. Judith called from the porch. "Maureen, come sit, let Colette handle it, she doesn't mind." Maureen set the towel down and walked away. Monday evening I overheard Judith on the phone. I was carrying a basket of wet beach towels from the washer to the dryer, walking through the hallway past the master bedroom. My master bedroom, the door slightly ajar. "Oh, it's gorgeous here," she said, her voice warm and performative. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, steps from the beach. Gerald would have loved it. It's really become our family's anchor, you know. I found it a few years ago and I've been maintaining it ever since. The upkeep is exhausting, but that's what you do for family. She had erased me from the story of my own house. She had erased my grandmother. She had rewritten the entire history of that property in a single phone call, casting herself as the discoverer, the maintainer, the matriarch who had provided this gift to her family through her own effort and sacrifice. I set the basket down in the laundry room and stood there for a full minute, listening to the dryer hum, feeling something solidify inside me like concrete setting. Tuesday night at dinner, her friend Pamela asked over grilled chicken and coleslaw who actually owned the property. Judith didn't hesitate. "It's a family property," she said, refilling her wine glass. "The Ashworths have had it for years." I set down my fork. "Actually," I said, "my grandmother left it to me." The table went quiet. 8 faces turned toward me. Judith's expression shifted in stages: surprise, calculation, and then a smile. The kind of smile that comes right before something breaks. "Well, technically," she said, waving her hand as though she were swatting away a gnat. "But it's really become a family home, hasn't it? We all take care of it." She turned to Pamela with a conspiratorial lean. "Colette's grandmother left her a little cottage. We fixed it up. Made it livable. A little cottage. We fixed it up." She had replaced curtains I didn't ask her to replace, and thrown away a recipe box she had no right to touch, and she had somehow convinced herself she had renovated the property. That night, at 11:47, I was in the small guest room reading a novel when Judith knocked once and opened the door without waiting for an answer. She was wearing her bathrobe, arms crossed over her chest, chin lifted. Maureen stood behind her in the hallway, holding a glass of wine, her face carefully neutral. "Colette," Judith said, her voice low and controlled, "I've been thinking about what happened at dinner, and I don't think it's appropriate for you to correct me in front of my friends." I set my book down on the nightstand. "I stated a fact," I said. "You stated it to embarrass me. In my own house." "Your house," I said. She held up her hand. "I've discussed this with Maureen, and we both agree. I think it's best if you leave tonight. Derek can stay. You can come back when you've had time to think about how you speak to me." She walked to the closet, pulled my suitcase from the shelf, opened it on the bed, and began placing my clothes inside. Not throwing them. Placing them, garment by garment, folding each one with the care of a woman who wanted me to understand that this was deliberate. She was not angry. She was composed. She was performing an eviction with the same efficiency she had once managed open houses. "This is my house," she said, closing the suitcase zipper. "You were never welcome here." She carried the suitcase to the front porch. Maureen held the screen door open. Derek was standing in the living room. He had heard every word through the thin walls of a 3-bedroom cottage. He said nothing. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, staring at a spot on the wall above the television, and he said nothing. I walked out in bare feet. No shoes, no wallet, no purse. My phone and my car keys. The porch light was on and the moths were circling it in lazy loops. Doris Kendall, the neighbor, was standing on her own porch in her bathrobe, watching. She lifted a hand, half wave, half apology. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk of my car, sat behind the wheel, and pulled out of the driveway at 11:59. I drove 43 miles south to a Holiday Inn in Southport. I checked in at 12:51 in the morning using Apple Pay on my phone because my wallet was still in the house, in the kitchen drawer where I always kept it. The night clerk was a young woman named Tasha who looked at my bare feet and nightgown and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I was about to be. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, opened my laptop, and drafted an email to Howard Calloway. The subject line was 3 words. Beach house eviction. Howard called me at 8:15 the next morning. I was sitting in the hotel breakfast area, eating a stale blueberry muffin and drinking coffee from a paper cup. His voice was calm and measured, the voice of an attorney who had been practicing real estate and estate law for 31 years and had seen every variation of family greed that existed. "Colette," he said, "I want to be very clear about something. You are the sole legal owner of that property. You have been since the day the will was probated and the title was transferred. No one, and I mean no one, has any right to be in that house without your express permission. Not your mother-in-law, not your husband, not the governor of North Carolina." "I know," I said. "I've always known." "Then you also know that you have every right to issue a formal notice to vacate, and if the occupants refuse to leave, you can file for eviction through the Brunswick County Courts." "How long?" "The notice gives them 72 hours. If they don't comply, we file. A judge can issue an order within 10 to 14 days. "Do it," I said. "Send the notice." Howard paused, the pause of a man who had done this before and wanted to make sure I understood the weight of what I was asking. "Colette, this will be a legal proceeding. It will be a matter of public record. Your mother-in-law will be served by the sheriff's department. I'm sitting in a Holiday Inn in a $12 nightgown because a woman who doesn't own my house told me I was never welcome in it. I'm sure Howard, he drafted the notice that afternoon. I reviewed it at 4:37 from my car in a Walgreens parking lot in Southport, where I had stopped to buy a toothbrush, a tube of toothpaste, and a pair of $3 flip-flops because I still didn't have shoes. The notice was 2 pages, clean, precise, devastating in its simplicity. It was addressed to Judith Elaine Ashworth and all occupants. It cited the property deed recorded in Brunswick County, my sole ownership, and their unauthorized occupation of the premises. It gave them 72 hours to vacate. Howard filed it with the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office on Thursday morning. Deputy Hank Roperson served it at the beach house at 2:15 that afternoon. I know the exact time because Howard confirmed it by email at 2:22. I was back home in Wilmington by then, sitting at my desk, running payroll for my company, which had just signed its 231st client. Derek called me 9 times that day. I answered on the 9th call at 6:43 in the evening. His voice was tight, confused, defensive. "Where did you go?" "Mom said you left in the middle of the night." "I left?" I said. "Your mother packed my suitcase, carried it to the porch, and told me I was never welcome in my own house at midnight." "That's not leaving, Derek. That's being expelled from a property I legally own." Silence. 5 full seconds. "She said you were being disrespectful at dinner." "She threw away Grandma Loretta's recipe box. She moved us out of our bedroom. She told 12 people the house was hers. She assigned me breakfast duty in my own kitchen, and then she folded my clothes into a suitcase and set me on the porch in my bare feet." "Which part of that is me being disrespectful?" Derek exhaled, a long, slow breath. "What do you want me to do, Colette?" "I want you to come home, and I want you to understand that what happens next is going to change things between your mother and me permanently. There is no going back from this." "What do you mean? What's happening?" "You'll see." Over the next 72 hours, I executed 3 tasks with the same methodical calm Judith had used to pack my suitcase. First, I called a locksmith in Sunset Beach named Ray Dupree and scheduled a complete lock change for the following Monday. Every exterior door, every window latch, every deadbolt, $1,240. I paid in advance. Second, I contacted a property management company called Coastal Haven Rentals and began the process of listing the beach house as a short-term vacation rental. The property manager, a woman named Angela who specialized in oceanfront homes, estimated weekly income between $38.50 to $200 during peak season. Third, I assembled every piece of documentation related to the house into a single binder: the original deed, the will, the title transfer, 3 years of property tax records, every one paid by me, the homeowner's insurance policy in my name, the maintenance fund statements, Angela's rental estimate, A printed screenshot of Judith's Facebook post from July, the one captioned, "Our family's happy place, the Ashworth Beach House." I tabbed each section. I labeled each divider. I placed the binder on my desk and I looked at it the way you look at something you've been building for a long time without realizing it. During those 72 hours, I went to work every day. I ran payroll. I reviewed quarterly projections with Sandra. I attended a client lunch at a restaurant on Front Street where I ordered the salmon and discussed tax planning strategies for a growing dental practice. No one at that table knew what was happening in my personal life. No one at my company had any idea that their boss had been thrown out of her own house 3 days earlier by a woman in a bathrobe. I kept my life moving forward while Judith's was about to stop. That is what silence looks like when it's working. Judith did not vacate within 72 hours. Of course she didn't. She called Derek and told him the notice was absurd. "That house is an Ashworth house," she said. "Family property. She can't evict family." That's not how any of this works. Howard filed the formal eviction complaint with the Brunswick County District Court on the following Tuesday. Case number 23 CV 4712. The hearing was scheduled for September 11, 2023, 10 o'clock in the morning. Judith found out about the court date on a Thursday evening. She called Derek at 7:22. I was sitting next to him on the couch. He put her on speaker. "Your wife?" she said, her voice vibrating with a fury I had never heard from her in 9 years, "is trying to drag me into a courtroom, over a beach house, over my own beach house. This is what you married, Derek. This is the kind of woman you brought into this family." "It's not your beach house," I said. There was a long pause. "Excuse me?" "It's not your beach house, Judith." "It never was. My grandmother purchased it. She left it to me. My name is on the deed, the taxes, the insurance. You don't have a key that works anymore, and if you don't vacate before the hearing, a judge will order you removed." Her breathing was audible through the phone. "Derek, are you hearing this? Are you going to sit there and let her talk to me this way?" Derek looked at me. For the first time in 9 years, he didn't look at the floor. He didn't look at the wall. He looked directly at me. And then he said, "Mom, she owns the house. You threw her out of her own house in the middle of the night. She's right." I expected Judith to scream. She didn't. She hung up. The silence afterward lasted 12 seconds. Derek put the phone down, pressed his palms against his knees, and said quietly, "I should have done that years ago." "Yes," I said. "You should have. If you've made it this far into the story, I want to pause and say thank you. If anything I've said resonates with you, if you've ever been pushed out of something that belonged to you by someone who believed their voice was louder than your deed, drop a comment and tell me your story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this would be a good time, because what happens next is the moment I've been building toward." The eviction hearing was held at the Brunswick County Courthouse on September 11, 2023 at 10 o'clock in the morning. Courtroom B. Judge Patricia Whelan presiding. I arrived at 9:20 with Howard. I wore a navy blue dress, low heels, my hair pulled back. No jewelry except my wedding ring and the small gold pendant my grandmother had given me for my 16th birthday. Howard carried the binder. Judith arrived at 9:45. Cream blazer, pearl earrings, hair freshly done at a salon in Wilmington the previous afternoon. She had assembled a delegation: Graham, who had driven 3 hours from Charlotte, Maureen, who had flown in from Raleigh, Pamela, the Bible study friend from the dinner table, and an attorney named Dale Winslow from a boutique firm in Wilmington that specialized in property disputes. 5 people, including Judith, arranged in a row on the left side of the courtroom, like a panel of judges at a county fair. She saw me across the lobby and her chin lifted. She whispered something to Graham. He glanced at me once, then looked away, a reflex so familiar it could have been Derek's. The courtroom was small. 6 rows of wooden benches, fluorescent lights humming overhead, an American flag in the corner. A court reporter at a small desk. Judge Whelan, a woman in her mid-60s with silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the expression of someone who had presided over enough property disputes to be permanently unimpressed, reviewed the filing in silence for 2 full minutes before looking up. Howard presented the case in 12 minutes. He was precise and unhurried. He placed the original deed on the table, recorded in Brunswick County on March 14, 2020, in the name of Colette Loretta Brennan. He presented the will. He laid out 3 consecutive years of property tax records, the insurance policy, the maintenance fund, and then, with the deliberate calm of a man who understood the power of contrast, he placed a printed screenshot of Judith's Facebook page beside the deed. The post dated July 15, 2023, a photo of the porch, the caption, "Our family's happy place, the Ashworth Beach House, blessed." He let the image sit there on the table, next to the deed, for 8 seconds before saying, "Your Honor, the respondent has publicly claimed ownership of a property she has no legal interest in whatsoever." Dale Winslow stood. He argued that Judith had invested time and resources into the property's ongoing upkeep and had developed a reasonable expectation of continued access based on the familial relationship. Howard waited for him to finish. Then he asked one question. "Mr. Winslow, can you present this court with a single receipt, a single contract, a single written agreement, a single canceled check, or a single document of any kind demonstrating that your client has any legal interest in this property?" Dale looked at Judith. She was leaning toward him, whispering rapidly, her face flushed pink from the jawline up. Dale turned back to the judge and shook his head slowly. He had nothing. Judge Whelan removed her glasses. She looked at Judith. "Mrs. Heapoin, Ashworth, do you have any documentation whatsoever? Any deed, any title, any lease, any legal agreement of any kind, granting you ownership or tenancy of this property?" Judith stood. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was controlled. "Your Honor, that house has been in my family for 3 years. We've maintained it, we've cared for it, we've—" "Mrs. Ashworth, I'm asking about documentation." Judith's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "My son's wife, the property owner," Judge Whelan said, without inflection. The courtroom went completely still. Judith went pale. I watched her face. I watched the exact moment when she understood that family is not a deed, that love, however she defined it, is not a title, and that 3 years of calling someone else's house your own does not create a legal claim. The understanding crossed her face like a shadow passing over a field. Judge Whelan ruled in my favor. Full eviction order. 14 days to remove all personal belongings. Items remaining after the deadline would be classified as abandoned, court costs assessed to the respondent. The ruling took less than 4 minutes. The courtroom was silent afterward. Pamela stared at the floor. Maureen pressed a tissue to her lips. Graham sat with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, staring at the wall behind the judge's bench. Judith turned to look at me. Her eyes were wet, but her face was set like stone. She looked at me the way you look at someone you are seeing clearly for the first time. Not the bookkeeper, not the quiet daughter-in-law who stayed out of the way. Someone else entirely. I held her gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't nod. I just held it until she looked away. Outside the courthouse, Graham intercepted me in the parking lot. "You didn't have to do this publicly," he said. "I didn't have to be thrown out of my own house at midnight in my nightgown either." He stared at me for 4 seconds and walked to his BMW without another word. Maureen touched my arm as she passed. She said nothing, just the touch, a brief pressure of fingers against my sleeve, and then she was gone. Judith stood beside her Cadillac for a long time, keys in hand, not moving, just standing there in her cream blazer and pearl earrings, staring at the courthouse steps. I walked past her on the way to my car. She spoke without turning. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of you." I stopped. I turned. I faced her across 6 feet of September asphalt. "My grandmother left me that house because she trusted me to protect it. I am protecting it. That's not shame, Judith. That's exactly what she asked me to do." The drive home from the courthouse was 47 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I drove with the windows down, the September air warm and thick with salt from the coast, and I let the silence fill the car the way it had filled that courtroom. When I got home, Derek was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had finally stopped pretending that standing still was the same thing as standing up. He asked me how it went. I told him everything. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I will carry with me for a long time. I should have been the one standing in that courtroom, not you. I should have been the one protecting you from her years ago. I sat down across from him and I took his hand. Yes, I said, you should have. But you are saying it now. And that is either the beginning of something or the end of something. It's up to you which one. He looked at me across that table, and for the first time, I saw my husband without his mother's shadow behind his eyes. The beginning, he said. We sat there until the kitchen light turned golden. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling. Derek told Judith he supported the ruling. She called him a traitor. Graham sent a 3-paragraph email saying I had escalated a misunderstanding and that the family was deeply disappointed. I read it once and did not reply. On October 1st, the locksmith confirmed the property was fully secured. On October 15th, the first vacation renters checked in. A couple from Richmond, Virginia, married 32 years, celebrating their anniversary. They left a review that said the house was beautiful and the porch rocking chairs were their favorite part. I sat with that review for a very long time. The beach house earned $11,400 in its first 2 months as a rental. I set aside a portion for maintenance and taxes, and I put the rest into something I'd been planning since the day my grandmother died. The Loretta Brennan Memorial Scholarship, a fund for women re-entering the workforce after the age of 30. My grandmother went back to work at 41 after raising 3 children alone. She taught herself accounting from library books and managed the books for a marine supply company in Southport for 22 years. She would have liked that scholarship. She would have liked knowing her house was still holding someone up. Judith has not spoken to me since the courthouse parking lot. She tells people I stole her beach house. She tells her Bible study group that I'm a cold, calculating woman who weaponized the legal system against a grieving widow. She has never once acknowledged that she threw away my grandmother's recipe box. She has never acknowledged that she moved into my bedroom, assigned me chores in my own kitchen, posted my property on Facebook as hers, and then expelled me from it at midnight in my bare feet. In her version, she is the victim. In her version, she always has been. I don't hate Judith. I want you to understand that. Hatred requires energy I have long since redirected. What I feel now is something quieter, something closer to clarity than anger. I understand that Judith's cruelty was never about me. It was about control. She lost her husband. She was losing her centrality in her sons' lives. She needed something to grip, something that made her feel like the matriarch she believed she was meant to be. And she chose my house, my husband, and my silence as the things she could hold. The problem was, she mistook my silence for emptiness. She thought because I didn't fight back, I had nothing to fight with. She never considered the possibility that I was silent because I didn't need to speak. The deed spoke for me. The law spoke for me. 31 years of property taxes and a handmade recipe box and a grandmother who loved me enough to put my name on a document spoke for me. I think about my grandmother often. I think about the way she sat on that porch in the evenings with her feet up on the railing, watching the water turn from blue to gold to black, a cup of tea balanced on the arm of the rocking chair she'd owned since 1991. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. She built a life so quietly and so completely that when she left, the only thing louder than her absence was the gift she left behind. A house, a lesson, a granddaughter who finally learned that the loudest comebacks are built in silence. If you are watching this and someone in your life has claimed ownership of something that belongs to you, whether it's a house, a reputation, a role, or your own peace of mind, I want you to know this. You don't have to scream for it. You don't have to fight in their language. You just have to know what's yours and be ready to protect it when the moment comes. The moment always comes. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been thrown out of something that was rightfully yours? A home, a family, a story someone else rewrote without your permission? And what did you do about it? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Before I go, I want to take a moment to speak directly to you, the person who stayed through every word of this story. You didn't have to be here, but you are, and that means more than I can say. Every view, every comment, every time you share one of these stories with someone who needs to hear it, you're telling the world that these women matter, that their silence was never weakness, that their patience was never passivity. Revenge Chronicles was built by 3 people who believe that the most powerful stories are the ones no one expected to be told. If that resonates with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. A new story arrives tomorrow, and I promise you, you are going to want to hear it.